Okay, we've reconvened in open session and we are back live. We're letting the attendees know that they can rejoin the meeting. I think for the sake, I don't believe in any of the people who are attending were interested in the financial software part of it, but I think it's a number of people who are interested in some other things further down the agenda. So with that, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder for the following motion: that council rise and report from in camera, and that the committee of whole recommends that council approve the direction provided to staff as provided in camera, that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve staff to undertake a competitive procurement process for the purchase and implementation of new finance software, and that the committee as a whole recommends that council approve the funding of the purchase and implementation of new finance software from the municipal modernization funding being held in the special projects reserve. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Jameson and then Councillor Foti. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, there's no, I'll just make one comment. Our treasurer gave us and other staff gave us information in camera, but what I will say is that the software that we currently use for the municipality is somewhat antiquated and doesn't have all the capabilities that we need as a municipality to run extremely efficiently. So part of our job as council here is to resource the staff in such a way that we can find efficiencies, and our treasurer has identified one of the ways that we can become more efficient across all of the different departments that operate here in the township. So we appreciate that insight and that detail. So that's why the motion is coming forward here. Any further discussion? I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? And it's carried. Thank you. Okay, so next on the agenda is delegation and presentations, and we have Ms. De Benedette, who is here on behalf of our library to talk about strategic plan and the annual report presentation. So Ms. De Benedette, please go ahead.
I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my slides there?
Sure can.
Yeah.
Great. All right, so hello, and thank you all for having me this evening. I'm very excited to be here to share with you some of our recent accomplishments at the Leeds and the Thousand Islands Public Library, including highlights from our 2021 annual report and the launch of our new strategic plan. As I've gone through 5 slides at once there. As I reflect on my first 9 months here, I can't help but think that the time has passed awfully quickly. It's been a very interesting time to move to a new community and a new organization. And certainly it's an unprecedented time for our modern public libraries to navigate providing public services in the midst of a pandemic. So it has been a bit of a roller coaster of changing restrictions, with the library closed to the public and then open and then back to curbside service, back to in-person service. So it's been challenging, but it has also been a very rewarding experience for me to work collaboratively with our staff and board as we find creative solutions to maintain library services throughout all of these changes. Which is why I would like to start by looking back at some of our accomplishments from 2021. So 2021 was a year of major adjustments and transitions at LTIPL. We have a new CEO. We were adjusting to kind of the longer term realities of COVID-19 as we entered our second year of modified services and programming models. But despite this, we registered 186 new patrons for library cards in 2021. During the initial phase of COVID restrictions, our staff made it possible for patrons to register for their library card online, which was a great way for us to extend access to our digital services to patrons at times when coming into the library may not have been possible. And between our in-person and curbside services, We circulated over 16,000 physical items, including books, DVDs, and magazines. And our patrons also used their cards to access 9,856 digital resources, which includes things like ebooks, downloadable audiobooks, genealogy research material, and other library research databases. We know that our patrons value those digital resources because they help extend our services outside of just our branches and our regular operating hours, because they can be accessed at any time with your library card. So this year, we've been lucky to add digital magazines to our online collection as well, in partnership with our Ontario Download Center Consortia. And already in just the first 2 months of offering this service, we've circulated over 160 titles to our LTIPL patrons. Another popular service that we offer is access to Wi-Fi and our public computers. In 2021, patrons connected to these services more than 11,000 times. We know that patrons are using these services for a wide variety of reasons, from working to banking, looking at the news, sending emails to family and friends. So providing internet access has really become an essential part of our services. And our staff also answered more than 1,000 reference and technology questions for patrons last year. This includes everything from recommending library materials to patrons of all ages, helping people complete research, or helping troubleshoot patron technology questions. But we also had several accomplishments that aren't as easy to capture in statistics. Things like maintaining access to services throughout the year. And that included things like adapting very quickly to changes in our patrons' needs. So one example of this was that our staff were able to very quickly develop a new service to print and laminate proof of vaccination certificates for our patrons when they were first implemented by the province. We also reconfigured several of our library spaces, particularly in Lansdowne and Sealy's Bay, to provide a better patron experience. In both of these branches, we redesigned our circulation desk area to make better use of our space and create a more welcoming and open space in those branches. We also completed the process of transitioning our library finances to the Township Finance Department, leading to greater collaboration between the library and the township and increased transparency and accountability. And our library board is also undergoing a comprehensive review of our policy manual. So we've already completed our board bylaws, our foundational and governance policies, and we're currently working on our operational policies. Of course, one of our most important accomplishments of 2021 was the significant amount of work that the board did on our new strategic plan. The new plan, which runs from 2022 through 2025, was launched on January 31st. And at its foundation, it is a plan that aims to re-engage our community after these last 2 years of disrupted service models. So I want to tell you a little bit about how this plan was developed and then what we are looking forward to in the years to come. So the first stage of our planning process was information gathering. We engaged with a skills advisor from the Ontario Library Service who consulted on our project from beginning to end. And so with our OLS advisor, we reviewed our past planning documents and evaluated what progress we had made towards previous strategic goals and where opportunities may have been missed or goals may have changed. We also reviewed our mission and vision statements. The library board then engaged in a consultation process, which included a community survey and virtual meetings with the staff and board for input. Information from all 3 of those consultations were compiled and reviewed to then identify some themes, key areas of overlap, and possible strategic directions. Using all of that feedback, our board members worked to identify 3 overall themes or strategic directions, and then to start setting our specific goals. And of course, now we've moved to the implementation phase. So we've set an operational plan that outlines our priorities and timelines to achieve our strategic goals. And from that plan, we have an annual work plan, which is reviewed at every board meeting so that the board gets regular updates on progress that's been made towards each of our strategic goals. So I really want to dive in and tell you what some of those goals are. But first, I'd like to introduce you to our brand new mission and vision statements. So before we could set our goals, we really needed to establish what we were working toward. What is our end goal for what the library should be and what role it should fill in the community? And what is our vision for what the library could accomplish? So what we've developed as our mission statement is that the Leeds in the Thousand Islands Public Library enriches and connects the community through shared resources, shared experiences, and accessible spaces. And our vision for the future of the library is to be a community hub that supports and promotes literacy and provides equitable access to ever improving collections and spaces. So how are we going to get there? Well, we've set 3 strategic directions that we think are essential in moving us towards that mission and vision. So those strategic directions are our services, which includes our collections, programming, and technology, our spaces, which includes both our indoor library spaces and the outdoor spaces around our branches, as well as opportunities for outreach that will bring our services and programs out into the community, and our alignments, which looks at our partnerships, our administration, and our governance. Under our services, we plan to promote literacy and build community by enhancing our service offerings in purposeful and sustainable ways. We will focus on developing our collections, creating community programming, and improving our technology. The outcome that we're working towards here is a library that feels refreshed and relevant to the community, where people find the information and the resources that they need, where they take part in engaging programming, and where they have access to innovative technology. Under our spaces, we plan to improve our patron experience by creating welcoming indoor and outdoor spaces and finding new ways that we can use our spaces to benefit the community. So the outcome we're working towards there is a library that feels welcoming and accessible to the whole community, somewhere that is a gathering place for community use. And finally, under our alignments, we plan to strengthen our library by focusing on good governance, good management, and good communication. We will have a strong foundation of policies, procedures, and plans to support our mission and vision. And the outcome we want to achieve is a library that's accountable, transparent, and well-governed, and which is a space where patrons and staff feel safe, supported, and welcome. So what that looks like is a lot of both exciting and attainable goals. So for 2022, some of the things that we're working towards are upgrading our computer workstations in all 3 of our branches with funding from the library's reserve fund. We'll also be completing a collection evaluation to identify gaps in our collection, and then we'll use that evaluation to develop a 3-year collection plan. So this will help us guide our collection development and also apply for grants that will target enhancements to our collection. So for example, we might find that circulation is very high in our large print collection, and then we can apply for targeted grant funding to enhance our large print selection. We'll also be reconnecting with our community partners and working towards initiating more community-led programming and seeing the return of in-person programming at the library. Under our spaces, we'll be working on improving our signage and wayfinding in all of our branches so our patrons can easily search for and access the material they need. We're also working on incorporating our outdoor spaces and the township parks into our summer programming, which is particularly relevant as we're planning to return to that in-person programming for our summer reading club this summer. And we'll also be assessing our Wi-Fi range for outdoor and after hours use to ensure that patrons have reliable access to this service, even outside of our regular open hours. And under our alignments, we're working on updating all of our job descriptions and developing training plans for our staff members. We're also in the process of creating a legacy document, which will help to guide our incoming library board as we prepare for the municipal election and the appointment of a new board. We'll also be continuing our policy review where we'll be looking at our operational policies and procedures. And looking beyond 2022, we have many other goals, but a few highlights I thought discuss briefly were we would really like to pursue additional grant funding targeted at some of our collections, such as large print, digital, and children's collections. develop new literacy promotions, and various types of passive and community-led programming that will engage different sectors of the community and promote a love of reading and lifelong learning. We want to work on increasing access to our spaces by community groups outside of regular library operating hours. Evaluate the accessibility at all of our branches to ensure that the library is available to everyone. Continue to work with our archives working group to reopen the archives and to update their policies and procedures. Work on a new marketing and communications plan, develop an orientation plan for our new library board, and create more streamlined processes for onboarding and training new staff. So these are just a few of the exciting things that we have planned that will help us re-engage with the community, deliver high quality library services, and maintain a sustainable, well-managed, and well-governed public library. So copies of our full 2022 to 2025 strategic plan are available in all 3 of our library branches, as well as on our website for anyone who wants to browse the full strategic plan. I believe you have a copy in your council package as well, but they're also available to members of the public. And again, I just wanted to thank you for having me tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about what we have going on at the library or what we are looking forward to in our strategic plan.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I'm sure we'll have some things to hear from the rest of council, but that presentation was very succinct and thorough, and very pleased to see the plans for the future for the library, and so cohesive. So I'll entertain any comments in regards to the delegation. Go ahead, Councillor Garreau.
I'd like to thank the library CEO for that great presentation, and it's refreshing to see a nice document with good, solid goals. I do have a question. Jeanette, how are the libraries connected to the internet? Is it by fiber at every branch? Second question, digital literacy has been a term that has been tossed around by the Ontario government in a number of web seminars I've been attending. And it dawns on me that I personally had an e-health meeting. And I asked the young lady from Smith Falls, I said, how is this been accepted by the public? And she said, unfortunately, it's not going too well. It seemed to me, let's face it, maybe a lot of the folks were a little older and less digitally inclined. It struck me as it was a marvelous thing to sit and chat, just as we are now in a structured environment for health. And so I would hope that we might go with the e-health digital literacy and get people in there if they can't afford or don't have the equipment to make that possible, because sometimes it does require a little upgrade. I would hope that we could take that on and actually perhaps promote it somewhat. I think that would be a very worthwhile thing going into the future. It might take a few years. And secondly, the last time I was in a branch, and I have to admit it was some time ago, but I was sitting at your digital desk. So this would be my third question. And I was using, I would say not as friendly not as friendly hardware as exists in the real world. I mean, my 3 computers that are sitting right in front of me, each one of them is more friendly than what I was using. So therefore, it struck me that if you want to encourage people to use this technology with all this wonderful internet that's coming down the pipe, we need to make it user friendly. We don't want someone to have to come over and instruct you how to use the darn thing. So I hope we're doing that. And it sounded like what I saw, that's happening. So that puts us in the 21st century. And I think your report covered that. Thank you very much.
So in response to the first question, we actually have a different Wi-Fi setup at every branch. So in Lyndhurst, we have satellite internet. In Sealy's Bay, we have a DSL connection. And in Lansdowne, we currently have a DSL connection, but we're looking at, it looks like it will be a possibility to have a fiber connection at the Lansdowne branch. So we are investigating that at the moment. So we have a variety of internet options depending on where the branch is located. But all of the branches do offer Wi-Fi as well. And we have some Wi-Fi extenders so that patrons can still access the Wi-Fi from outside, which is important in some of the branches that are not open every day. So people still have access to the service. In terms of that digital literacy, it's definitely something that we think about often. Our staff do a lot of tech support, kind of help and training. And I really anticipate once we kind of get back to our regular in-person programming that having some kind of one-on-one tech appointments where people can actually book a time to come in and have some of that training one-on-one with a staff member will resume. We've had some things like that in the past, and I anticipate that there will be a lot of interest once we get back to that in-person programming, because more and more things have moved online over the past 2 years, and I think that that's a trend that will likely continue.
New equipment.
New equipment, yes. So we have kind of a mishmash of various equipment from different times, and that is what we are working something that we're working on now. So one of the goals in our plan is actually in our operational plan is to develop an actual technology renewal plan so that we can get onto a more regular renewal cycle, so that our machines are the same in all of our branches, so that it's easier to have tech support, and so that patrons who visit different branches don't have to familiarize themselves with a different computer system every time they're there. But yeah, we are definitely in the process of doing some upgrades now from the library's reserve fund, and I think there's probably more of that kind of in the future as we continue to upgrade.
Follow-up, Councilor Burrow?
Just a very quick follow-up. It was disappointing to hear that we're using DSL at those library branches, and I do appreciate the struggle. It's not about the library, trust me. Do you have, or I can't imagine you have enough bandwidth to handle what's going on if you're using DSL connections. So do you need a task force or a committee to try and get you fiber? There should be fiber at every branch. The Ontario government has as much as said, if anything, they want fiber going to branches of libraries, you know, these institutionals that they blather on about constantly. And it upsets me a great deal that we're talking DSL to 3 branches. There are probably 2 out of 3 branches. That's terrible.
Yeah, there is a program that was announced, funding that was announced a couple of years ago to upgrade internet services in small and rural and northern libraries. Yep. And what we ended up hearing back from them, that the only branch of ours that would be eligible would be the Lansdowne branch, because the fiber is already accessible in the community. Like, it was just last mile funding to get it from the post to your building. And we do have plans in place to get that fiber in Lansdowne, but as far as I know, there are no current options available for our other branches. So it's definitely an area for, I think, advocacy and an area that could be improved and hopefully will improve in the future.
You need to be talking to, perhaps in the north, you need to talk to WTC and ask them straight up what it would cost them, if it's possible, if they have any fiber nearby, to run it to Sealy's Bay, and also perhaps to Lyndhurst. A discussion never hurt. Things are changing monthly. Money is changing hands monthly from the Ontario government. That Infrastructure Ontario, $4 billion. Surely we can afford somebody to get some damn fiber to those libraries. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments or questions in regards to the delegation? Councillor Jameson?
Just to remind Councillor Gorell, Your Worship, that we really had a good plan for fiber. I'll leave it there.
We did.
Thank you very much for that timely reminder. Councillor Maybe?
Yes, Madam Mayor, through you, I'd just like to say to our library participant tonight that is a very good report. Very pleased to see that. And it looks like we've turned to the next chapter, and it's very appreciated, as
Yeah.
well as our two fellow counselors who sit on your board. The updates and the information that they pass back to us is great. So thank you very much for doing a great job.
Yes, sir.
Here,
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you very much. And we will move forward in our agenda unless there are any questions. This committee of the whole, I should ask if there's anybody in the gallery that would like to put their hand up. Please use the hand up function if you're participating in the call, if you have a question for Ms. De Benedetto. I don't see any hands up. Okay, so we'll move forward to number 5 on the agenda, which is staff reports. Planning report SR-028-022 zoning bylaw amendment application number Z-2021-017-311 Stratford Road, application to rezone the boathouse to allow rooftop deck. So I'll read the motion, and then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder. That the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment attached to this report as Exhibit A to rezone the subject property to environmental protection EP-6 to permit the marine facility on the property to include a rooftop deck. Mover and a seconder, please. Counselor Maybe. And seconder. Need a seconder, Counselor Foti. Okay, motion is on the floor. Further discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Counselor Maybe, and then Counselor Grow.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Just wondered if there was any further information to come forward from our planner.
Madam Planner, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, through you. I would just add that this item was deferred from the December meeting to allow the applicant to address the comments provided by the public. Attached to the staff report is a submission from the applicant as well as an updated staff report. I also would note that I circulated a letter of public correspondence that was circulated earlier today by email. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Go ahead and follow up, Counselor Maybe.
Yes, to our Director of Planning. Just wondering if all the if everything has been met with the conditions of the property, permit wise, everything else other than changing this the zoning. Thank you.
Through your worship, the applicant has addressed all of our concerns to date. All construction activity was halted on the property. It was left in a safe condition, and there has been no further activity that we're aware of to date. Should council support and approve the zoning bylaw amendment, the applicant will be finalizing their site plan control approval and then be able to proceed with the building permit to complete construction on the structure.
Okay, Counselor Garral, sorry.
Before I speak, I'd like to hear from the public. If anyone in the public has something they might want to say.
Okay. I don't have any hands up for anybody from the public at this point in time.
Okay, then regarding the proposed bylaw, that is a proposed bylaw at this time. And is it something at this time that we can move to amend? I mean, it's not on the table, I guess, but it strikes me that it is the bylaw that ultimately says so. Can it be amended to strike down section E, or pardon me, section D? Deck on top of the roof and the marine jail shall be permitted. Can we strike that? And strike E as well? What are we being asked to vote on? We're being asked to vote if it's we are going to allow it.
Correct. I
Correct.
think
Okay.
well, let
That is
the planner speak to that, but
Yeah.
keep in
Yeah.
mind that we have approved these for other facilities that have come forward.
I'm well aware, but
Okay.
they went through a process that was appropriate. We are the township of Go. We're not the township of No, but we like people to follow the rules. We're a rules-based organization. The applicant, not once but twice, disregarded the conditionality set out by one of the most important committees in this township, and one that I regard very highly, And that doesn't sit well with me. And it doesn't sit well if it's going to happen in the future, because what we're doing is we're aligning ourselves with this concept of better to beg forgiveness than it is to ask permission. And that, in the big sense of things, is not the position I want to be taking. And I'm very strident on this. I've lost a lot of sleep on this one. And that's my position. And I would really like to hear a wholesome, once again, conversation on this. This concept that someone can just do as they wish, that isn't the way it works in the big world. And I'm not agenda driven in any sense of the word, but I am a counselor, and I want to make it clear we're the township of go, not the township of no. Thank you.
I'll recognize the planner to address those concerns.
Thank you, through your worship. So with respect to clauses D and E, those are the only reasons that this application for zoning amendment is required. The boathouse itself is a permitted use. The size of the boathouse is a permitted size as approved through the Committee of Adjustment. So the purpose of this zoning amendment is to allow the sun deck on top of the boathouse. Should council not be supportive of the amendment, there's no amending the recommended bylaw. It's denying the application. Should
Okay.
that be the case, then there is an appeal mechanism through the Ontario Land Tribunal that the applicant may pursue. As I noted previously when we discussed this, there are enforcement mechanisms which were taken. A stop work order was issued and work stopped. So the applicant did do what they were required to do. They were required to apply for and obtain building permits following approval. They pursued their site plan control approval in accordance with their minor variance application and restricted any access to the rooftop structure and removed the railings as required. Should this application be supported, they would be required to come back in and obtain further building permits. The prosecution component of that is that the cost of the permit would be doubled in accordance with the tariff of fee bylaw for the municipality. So that's the enforcement mechanism. When orders were placed on the property, the owner did comply and follow through and submit the necessary applications to obtain the required approval. So that's where this sits.
Thank you. Further comments or questions from councillors in regards to this motion that's on the floor? Councillor Foti, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to our Director of Planning. Is there any other penalties that we're not aware of that would or could be incumbent upon this applicant for the wayward actions previous?
Go ahead, Madam Planner.
Through your worship, the enforcement mechanism was under the building code, as well as through the zoning bylaw. The applicant has submitted all of the necessary applications, including the Committee of Adjustment application, the zoning amendment application, as well as the site plan control application, which were required in accordance with the building code enforcement. The other mechanism for enforcement is the cost of the building permit applications. So the applicant has followed through, and we've taken all necessary actions that we can take within our power to enforce on the property, and the owner has come forward and complied.
Go ahead,
Follow
follow up,
up if I may.
Councillor Foti. Yep.
Thank you. Madam Planner, you've been in the township here a number of years now. As there, to the applicant's own presentation back in December, it was indicated they've used this rooftop for approximately 11 years, if I remember right. Has there been any complaints up until this latest presentation?
Through your worship, at the public meeting, the applicant indicated that they have been using this rooftop deck area for some time. The current Committee of Adjustment approval was to extend the rooftop area. I believe it was by 7 feet. We did go through our records, and there have been no complaints about the use of this rooftop area, even though it was occurring contrary to the conditions on the previous minor variance application. So no, we don't have any complaints or concerns. The neighbor that does abut the property has submitted some concerns through this process, but we don't have any previous concerns on record.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jameson, you have your hand up.
Your worship, I think we're hearing from our planner that indeed every step has been taken on the part of the planning department to get this lined up properly. I know that from an emotional standpoint, with respect to what I hear, it's funny how it's a conversation outside the grocery store or on Lyndhurst Road in the village, about what are we going to do about that way up here. But it has less to do with what is actually happening here right now than the idea that people just go ahead and do things and then seek forgiveness later. But in this context, no matter how I read it, I have to agree, or I have to look at the efforts of the planning department to have them comply, to have them change things, to have them get back in line with what they're supposed to be doing. And on that basis, I'm not sure whether we really, other than wanting to punish perhaps, deny this applicant the opportunity to move ahead on this, but be mindful of the fact that we are expecting a report from the planning department down the road on how we might proceed in the future. And I'm looking forward to seeing that at some point. So that's my point of view on this thing. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions in regards to this motion that's on the floor? I don't see any, and I don't see any hands up in the attendees. So with that, I will call the question of council. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed? Okay, and the motion is carried. Okay, so next on the agenda is planning report SR-029-22 building revenue expense and reserve fund report for 2021. So the motion going on the floor is that the committee of the whole recommends that council receives the annual building revenue and expense report as information, and that it will be posted publicly on the TLTI website. And that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the transfer of $83,915.52, being the 2021 building department surplus to the building reserve fund. Mover and a seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Grell. The seconder. Okay, motion is on the floor. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Grell.
Everything's pretty straightforward. I was just curious when I looked at the I've got the right one here. Stand by the insurance. Hang on, make sure I got the right one here. Yes, the insurance boost that was mentioned. What insurance is required for a building department that is $64,000 worth?
Through your worship, and I would ask
Defer.
that the Director of Finance
Answer.
contribute to that. I do know that it was previously under budgeted in prior years, and that what's in there now is much more reflective of the current billing, but I would defer to the Director of Finance.
Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, through your worship. So I'm just actually trying to quickly pull up my spreadsheet that summarizes it, but there are actually a number of different policies related to the building department. And unfortunately, in the past, we weren't allocating the actual costs. I'm not sure how the formula was come up with previous to my being at the township. The first year or two, I kind of went along with budget, but we actually this year allocated the actual costs based on the insurance policies and the related costs for each policy, and that's how we came up with this number. So if I can find it, I can circulate the information to council just to give them a bit more background on what those costs are related to.
That should be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yep.
Follow up, Councillor Grell, or are you good with that if we get the extra information?
I was really just curious what it is we're insuring in the building department for $64,000. Thank you.
So through your worship, just I think, and this is just off the top of my head, but generally there have been a lot more claims over the last few years as it relates to building permits and inspections, and municipalities end up being sued because of what the residents perceive to be inspections that maybe weren't done in accordance with the code or other errors or omissions or whatever. So there are more lawsuits in that area. So that's partly why I think those insurance costs have increased.
because we have to defend ourselves in the event that we are being sued by an individual in the township who might have purchased a home that in their mind didn't pass inspections or that we didn't do the inspections properly.
And so,
Correct.
so rather than a general insurance for the township, it's specific then
To the building
the-
department.
And is that insurance in addition to the insurance policies that the township pays anyway? Because this is an entity unto itself. Does that make it a separate insurance fee?
Through
Director
your
Tyndall?
worship. Yeah, through your worship. So what we do is we take basically the total insurance package that we receive from our insurance provider, and we break it down into actually across all the departments.
Oh.
And so there's actually about $37,000 related to municipal liability insurance that we allocate to the building department. And then errors and omissions is 22,000. So those are the two main drivers for that insurance. But it's one policy, but we actually break it down to the different departments, different facilities, and try to allocate the costs. And for the building department in particular, because it is funded through building permit fees, not through the tax rate, we do try to allocate the costs that actually apply there.
Right. No, thank you. That helps. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions in regards to the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is operations report SR-031-22 2021 private road grant program. And the motion reads that the committee of the whole recommends that council approve the distribution of 25,000 in private road grants per the 2022 operating budget. Moved by, seconded by Councillor Fody. And sorry, and the other person had their hand up. Oh, Councillor Olkey, thank you.
Your worship, I have to step out on this one. I'm on a private road that is applied for a grant. I was going to just mute and shut my video off and leave the room. And if you could text me to come back on, I'm afraid to go off
Yeah,
in
please
case
don't.
I never come back again.
Just mute yourself and turn your video off, please, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any comments or questions in regards to, go ahead, Councillor Olkey.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in general, a few years ago, we raised this amount. It's somewhat ironic in that I was quite proud of having been part of that, and given how many people live on the private roads and do their best to maintain them. And I was quite shocked to hear that someone had actually received less. And it looks like in the detail of this report, the amount per kilometer will actually be less than last year, although costs of commodities have gone up. Would that be because we've recalibrated the length of some roads, or just more people have applied to the same pot, or both? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through your worship, the calculation is based on the number of applications submitted and the total length overall of the lanes that have submitted. So the cost of each lane, of each linear kilometer of each lane, hinges on how many applications we received. So we received more applications this year than we had the previous year, resulting in more kilometers submitted, resulting in a lower overall cost than what we had the previous.
Go ahead. Yep.
Thank you for that. That explains quite clearly why the amount per kilometer has gone down. Pardon me. I think we might have to look at revisiting the total amount as time goes on, since it is important to keep these lanes in private roads up to standard for fire access and ambulance access and things. This isn't a princely sum, but it does help the people maintain the roads. So look for a motion to come in future. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through your worship. As part of this report, a little further down, there was, I'd like to revamp the entire private lane program. We currently don't have a standard that people are working towards for emergency accessibility We've had challenges even this winter with getting EMS and fire down private lanes. And our own plow trucks are unable to get down there to provide support because the lanes, they don't adhere to any sort of standard. So I've been working with the director of planning, and we're establishing a standard to go along with a bylaw for these private lane standards for moving forward. And as part of that, we'd like to have a funding mechanism that considers not only the length of the lane, but how many people are served down the lane. And then a two-tiered process where capital investment would have a higher priority than maintenance. I think it's important that we're striving to achieve this standard, and then the maintenance of the lane thereafter would be still considered, but would be considered secondary, so that all of our lanes, our lanes are only as good as the weakest one. So as we move the standard of our lanes up, then we would focus more on maintenance at that point, but we're not there at this time.
I'm going to relinquish the chair to Councillor Olkey to have further discussion on this motion, as I will need to declare an interest as well. And I apologize that I didn't do that sooner. So I'll relinquish the chair to Councillor Olkey. The motion is on the floor, but I will leave the room at this point in time, and he can call the question when appropriate.
Thank you, Your Worship. With that, are there any further points of discussion? Anyone in the gallery, please, from the public?
Councillor Fody put up his hand.
Okay, first Councillor Fody, then Councillor Gorell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask a question to our fire chief based on what our director of operations has stated. Have you encountered at all or often cases where our emergency vehicles can't get to a property or have do so with great difficulty?
Yes, and through you, Chairman. Absolutely, we've got, I'm looking at the list now, and I've been down a few of these lanes where if we had to get our big tankers or big tandem axle tankers down into some of these lanes, it certainly proves very, very challenging, even in the summertime, when you have a full growth of tree limbs and leafed out trees. I think we're talking with Director Holiday. We're looking to try to put a standard in, so not just road itself, but surrounding with the trees and a certain size opened up, so that we can get our bigger trucks down in there. But yes, we've absolutely had some issues where the road's not up to standard, where we've had to go and help EMS to get down through there as well.
Follow up, if I may. Thank you.
You froze up.
I would think that's pretty concerning, and I suspect our health issue that getting to them could be a real issue. So I applaud our director of operations and thinking of creating an overall standard that would encompass all the lanes all the time. Is that the way I understand that proposal, that you're going to revamp this so that, are we still going to alternate, or is that yet to be decided? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The intent is that we would provide, the way that I envision it, 50% coverage up to a certain dollar amount. It would result in an overall increase, at least I anticipate an overall increase of the amount of money that we're going to have to set aside for the private lanes, because everybody knows that capital expenses are typically higher than maintenance. You go to break rock on lanes to achieve a standard, and you're looking at big dollars. If you want to put gravel down to achieve a standard, it costs money. Culverts, brushing is a little more cost effective, but the overall cost for capital, instead of putting sand down on roads and grading every now and then, it definitely has some higher dollar values. So the intent is to increase that amount of money, but still try to get out to as many people as possible. Some initial conversations, we had considered a 50% share up to a maximum of $5,000. And that would contribute to, I think it would be appealing for people that are looking to upgrade their lanes. We would have to increase the budget, obviously, because I think we're going to get a lot of applications, and $50,000 might be a good start, and see where things go from there.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe it was Councillor Gorell next.
Thank you, through you, Councillor Olkey. To our manager, director of ops, I think you fleshed out a little bit of what I was curious about in your alternative section. I don't have any problem with the allocation this year of as slated, but you have fleshed out your concept is to so much funding up to 50% or whatever the case may be, because philosophically it's also an issue of those are private lanes. People have built on what were cottages, lots, and some lanes have been taking care of themselves quite nicely, thank you very much, and others have not. So I would be cautious as to bumping up that budget in general terms. We have it would be adding on to our kilometers of roads, which already are one of the major budget items we carry. I also remember when we were talking fire a couple of years ago, it was brought up that the 3/4 ton or whatever trucks were going to be implemented with more equipment. Why? So that they could get up these lanes. So a little bit of that had been addressed. And I just want us to be very cautious when we're talking a budget item for private lanes. Thank you, but I applaud the alternative that I read and you have fleshed it out. So thank you very much.
Okay, are there any more points for discussion? Anyone from the gallery? One more time. Right, hearing or seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Myself, okay. Looks like it's carried. Thank you. The mayor can return.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you for your understanding. Okay, so on to the next item on the agenda, which is 5.4 Operations Report SR-035-22, replacement of water meters in the Village of Lansdowne recommendation. And the motion reads that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council authorize staff to engage Neptune Technology Group for the replacement of all 274 water meters in the Village of Lansdowne. That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council authorize the purchase of water meter reader from Evans Supply in the amount of $17,413.17, inclusive of the net HST. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Fody and then Councillor Maybe. Motion is on the floor. Discussion, if any. Go ahead, Councillor Gorell, then Councillor Fody.
I know previously we had talked about this. How old are those meters, Director of Ops? How old are those meters? Secondly, how have we been accounting if so many of these meters are inefficient or faulty? How indeed have we been calculating and sending out bills? And seems complex there. And thirdly, is there any improvement on the warranty from seeing as we seem to be buying from the same people who we bought for before? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. So the first part of your question, the water meters, obviously we're buying from the same supplier. There is a warranty on those units, so there will be savings as a result of that. We had put out a program last year to replace the meters, as I'd explained in the report, and the cost was much higher. So by going through Neptune themselves, they have a group that comes in and replaces these for us. And then they will take our current meters back to their shop themselves, where we had to ship them out, and they'll test them to see if they're warrantable or not. The warranty that we have with Neptune is the best in the business, is what I've been told. It is a 20-year warranty. You get 10 years full warranty, and then after 10 years, it de-escalates down to zero at 20 years. So we are still covered within that warranty period, which is I think we're about 11 years right now. So we're at the top end of the de-escalation period. And then the third part of your question, I apologize.
Oh, how, if all of these meters, or a good percentage of the meters were faulty, how have we been accounting when it comes to billing? Are we in a bad situation with the citizens of Lansdowne?
So the billing is completed through the minimum billing cycle of the 15 cubic meters per month. So everybody's been receiving that minimum bill anyways. If they're using more than 15 meters, that's where we're losing at this point, because we're unable to account for that increased usage. The additional concern that I have is that if we were to have some sort of break in a service or we have loss, we're unaccounting for that right now. Now it's tracked at the intake, and it's tracked before it heads to the lagoons. So we have those numbers, but that number in between is kind of variable at this point until we've replaced these meters.
But we haven't, what I'm hearing you say is that the residents have just been paying at most sort of the minimum fee anyway, and the problem would have been in tracking additional above that minimum use. Does that sound correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foti?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I was quite pleased when I saw your report here, Director of Operations, that for a number of reasons. I haven't been the biggest fan of the way the Lansdowne water and sewer numbers have been provided since we've been on council. I won't reiterate what I've said a number of times already, but it's quite refreshing to see another player in the game whose numbers are actually coming in at less than. And the fact that you've coupled up with the town of Gananoque, I'm assuming that was maybe as much coincidence as anything that we're able to double up there and be able to allow Neptune to grace us a cut rate to come over and install these. The one question I do have, I didn't see in here, what are we looking at for a time frame? Did they indicate when they might do this work?
Through your worship, the time frame, what if we would do award this program to them, they're saying it'll be completed in 5 to 6 weeks.
Oh, really? Oh, well, I'll just leave it at that. I'm really pleased to see the water and sewer, the whole discussion. I'm glad to see it take a different direction, at least for the time being. Thank you.
Any further comments? Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
I know it's not totally explicit in this report, but the money to do this work is coming out of the water and sewer reserve funds, presumably. I'm not quite sure I see that. Just for the record, because of a lot of stray talk in the last little while, be assured that the balance of residents are not going to be paying for this. It's a question, Your Worship.
Director?
That is correct, through your worship. That is correct. It has been budgeted based on the water and wastewater budget for the year. That was included in our capital budget for this replacement. What is not also noted in the report is the amount of credit that we're going to receive back, because it is variable at this time. So even the people that are paying for this on the water system, they will see a credit coming back into the system as a result of the warranty that we're anticipating.
Okay. Perfect. Any further comments or questions in regards to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and it's carried. Thank you. Next, operations report SR-37-22 RFT OPS 2022-009, supply and application of microsurfacing. Motion reads that the committee of the whole recommends that council authorize staff to award a tender for the supply and application of microsurfacing to Miller Paving Limited in the amount of $207,494.08 inclusive of net HST. Mover and a seconder, please, for the motion. Councillor Olkey and Councillor Foti as a seconder. Okay, motion is on the floor, up for discussion. Any comments or questions? I think the report was fairly straightforward. Go ahead, Councillor Farrell, and then Councillor Jameson.
I appreciate the report and its complexity and the problems that it raises. And the one that comes to my mind is the concept of confidence in our asset management plan when we're presented with a 48% increase in a single product regarding a single micro finishing of roads. One that has bumped the cost, estimated cost in our budgeting process from $35,000 a kilometer to what, $50,000 a kilometer. So it really, I find it a bit staggering, and it's easy for me to lose confidence that moving forward in the budget process, that once again, we try to put in inflationary numbers, we try this, and I don't know that there's an answer to this. It just scares the hell out of me that we just keep coming back to, oh, we'll fund that out of a reserve, we'll fund that out of a reserve. Eventually, we're going to run out of reserves. And I don't know if there's an easy answer, but does anyone have any comment on the confidence we can have in our overall roads budget, or for that matter, anything of big ticket items? That's a hell of a hit for this little township.
Director.
Thank you, through your worship. The pricing that we're experiencing with microsurfacing directly attributes to the oil price right now. The MTO has the price index on their website, and we're seeing the highest prices that are recorded to date. So everybody's going to experience the same situation. The city of Kingston had put out a project for asphalt replacement patches where they go and they grind up some of the road and then they replace it. And where they had budgeted, I believe the number was $15 or $20 per square meter, was now $200 per square meter. They were seeing 8 and 10 times the cost as a result of, COVID pricing and the cost of the barrel right now. This is what we're up against. These are not normal times. The price of microsurfacing that were implemented in the asset management program are prices that I have created over the last 5 years with inflation rolled into them, and they worked every year except for this time when we went to put a tender in. So while I don't have confidence in the numbers that we received this year, I do have confidence in the process. I do have confidence in our asset management program that we're looking at the right roads at the right time. So I do have confidence with. But
Follow up, Councillor Groh.
Thank you for that, Dave. And regarding, I think I've got the term right, dual surfacing. I don't know what our budget was for dual surfacing this year, but do we expect a similar hike, inflationary pressure, oil pressure, whatever you want to call it? Do we expect that? I can't remember our budget number for possible dual surfacing, but I'm sure it's significant.
thank you, through your worship. There was an increase in surface treatment as well for the double surface treatments. It wasn't as high as this, but the percentage of the product itself wasn't as high as microsurfacing is. There's a higher concentration of asphalt cement within microsurfacing than there is with the single surface treatment.
Go ahead, Councillor Fody.
Thank you, worship, through you. Excuse me. I too, when I agree with Councillor Groh, when you look at these numbers and they get large fast, I kind of revert back to my day-to-day job. We've started saying no to some serious increases on the telephones that people we deal with. I'm kind of wondering what would happen to all these organizations. I don't feel, and it's the same plays out day to day with us. I don't feel that all these increases are warranted, meaning that some people are using the increase in fuel to start gouging and piggybacking on top and really exasperating these numbers. So I'm kind of wondering if we went the other way for 1 year. We had budgeted X number of dollars, and maybe we should cut back to the budgeted number we had agreed to. And whatever that does, that's what it does. And I think a lot of these companies that are out there making a living off this type of business, when they realize the orders aren't piling up, or at least they have a lot of spare time this summer, they may well go back and reconfigure their own numbers. Thank you.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. If that is the will of council to maintain the budget and reduce our quantities, we can certainly do that. We reserve the right to do that in our tender. We can do that, absolutely.
I would just ask the director to further his comment in regards to that. In the event that we were to reduce it back down to what was originally budgeted, how many kilometers are we missing then? Like how many, as far as microsurfing, you said it was 50,000 a kilometer. So essentially it's 1 kilometer that we wouldn't be microsurfacing, correct?
We'd have to remove approximately 1 kilometer of microsurfacing.
And the microsurfacing plan for this year was on which roads?
It was Sweets Corners Road from Highway 15 to Highway 33, and then roads within the village of Sealy's Bay.
Okay. Just so that when we're making that decision, we know exactly what it is that we would be holding off on if we were to limit ourselves to the budget that was originally set out.
One more thing that I'd like to add is that when we prepared these quantities together, we made sure that they work together. We didn't do a road in Lansdowne and a road in Lyndhurst and a road in Sealy's Bay. We lumped them all together, and the price that we're seeing is as a result of that as well. Because everybody knows when you mobilize from one project to another, you pay for that. So if we pull one road out of Sealy's Bay, we're going to have to pay a premium to get back into Sealy's Bay next year. I just want everybody to be aware of that as well.
Okay. Any further comments or, oh, sorry, Councillor Jameson, I see your hand now. I apologize.
To that last round of comments, I appreciate the director, Your Worship, mentioning that these things are estimated based on or based on the collective, not the individual roads. That's important for us to remember. But that sort of brings me to the comment I was going to make, which was if we delay 1 or 2 or whatever, we know the price will go up no matter what on what's left, as he's just pointed out. But the other side of the asset management is the asset management program has identified what is a problem that needs to be addressed. And I had a kind of a whiplash moment too when I read the report. So I share Councillor Gorell's concerns, but I think one of the challenges that we inherited was neglect. And so these are not times we want to see, but the reality is it could be a lot worse if we wait another year or 2. And then what do we do? Yes, the price might come down a bit. They never come all the way down, but it's kind of one of those things where we're darned if we do and darned if we don't. But I'm concerned about safety and people more than anything else. And the other question I have is, and I know I asked this of the director in an email, and he's ignoring me, and I understand why. Why is there a film of how micro surfacing works? I'd like to review it. I believe you sent me a link a year or so ago from Good Roads or whomever on how it works, because I just wonder how it works and if there's any kind of film you can send along for the uninitiated. Thank you.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, through Your Worship. And no, I'm not ignoring you, Councillor Jameson. I had staff go out and record videos of the segments of road that we had included in the village of Sealy's Bay. And I didn't receive an opportunity to look at it until the very end of the day today. By that point, we were coming in anyway, so I figured I'd talk to you, only to find out that you weren't here. The information for microsurfacing can be found on the PPRA website. It's the Pavement Preservation Recycling Ash, whatever it is. I will send you through the link to it again to council so that you have it. Really good pile of knowledge on that the page. I just want to add one more comment. Councillor Gurel had made a comment about drawing from the reserves. We were actually drawing the funds, the overage of this project from the contingency fund. The purpose of the contingency fund, we'd included in the budget $75,000 for unforeseen overages. So this was already included in the budget. We're not going back to the well. This fund already existed within the capital budget for this purpose.
Thank you. I just want to say, I was going to ask you, in brackets, there's $75,000. So that was the contingency from the road reserve.
It's not coming from a reserve. That's out of operations, I believe.
It's coming from the capital budget. There was an item
Right.
included in the linear capital budget for contingency.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Foti, follow up?
Yes, please, Your Worship. To the Director of Operations, with the escalating cost and fuel right now, these arrangements made to do the roads you have listed here, are they locked in at a price, or do today's skyrocketing numbers throw them askew in another 30 days?
Our pricing is locked in for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion at hand, please signify. All those opposed, and the motion is carried. Thank you. Next motion that's on the floor is 5.6 Operations Report SR-038-22 Ivy Lee Wharf Design Options. Motion reads that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council authorize staff to proceed with option E, replacement and reconfiguration as described in Operations Report SR-038-22. Mover into seconder, please. Councillor Olkey and then Councillor Foti. And discussion on the motion. I'll recognize Councillor Gurel and then Councillor Maybe.
Would you let Councillor Maybe go first, please?
Sure, Councillor Maybe, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Councillor Olkey, and through you, Madam Mayor. I have several questions here. So if somebody wants to capture them, it'd be great. And I think I've seen it in the report that they are going to look for federal grants or additional money to come for this project. Also, as I was reading through it, underground, underwater components that need to be removed and whether they will be all removed. Removal of creosote material, which again poses to which one you want to do, and that everything that's in the ground right now is 56 years old. Had another question of how can granite bedrock be poor to very poor? I'd really like to know that one because that's kind of an odd one to me, I would think. And is that dock open all year round? Since it's so close to Ivy Lee, is it free of ice all year round? There's also talk of gates on what's proposed, and I'm wondering why the gates are being proposed, and that yes, for the design of E, I think is great. The only thing that I have difficulty with is the amount of wood that's proposed to be left in the ground. And again, the rock is 10 to 20 meters from the surface of the water, if I remember the report correctly, and that there was a suggestion of putting piles in, but that is boring to put the piles down deep enough. But again, as I had mentioned earlier in my comment here about removing all wood or creosote products that are in the ground there. So it does save us from potential issues in future. And that if you have piles with steel as a fence, let's say, because typically you put it vertically and not horizontally for your metal that's driven into the ground, other than you have round posts. So I think, is there another design that actually gets us to E, but then removes all the wood? And does it stay within, again, the top end of the project? My point for that is, if we're going to do it, let's do it right, because I've seen too many projects that don't get the proper attention to get all the material out of the ground or all the situations, and then they come back with scope creep, which I'd rather not see. And it's an investment that we have. It's waterfront property that is deemed so necessary for any community, and that we need to look after it, make it the safest that it possibly can be. And if we use steel products instead of wood products, maybe it'll last 100 years instead of 50 years. And yes, the price will be up there, but in 50 years, it'll be 3 times as much. So let's do it right now and let it last 100 years. Thank you.
Director, do you have, I think you can address those questions and remember most of them.
Thank you, through your worship. Oh, where do I start? Okay, thank you, Councillor Maybe. So the first part about the removing the wood and replacing it with other wood and the granite base. What they're finding with the wood or with the cribs is that they're starting to erode. They've come to the end of their life. Obviously, we're losing the rocks out of them. The wood is starting to decay, so it needs to be replaced. Our initial plan of removing the deck, doing a deck thickening to accommodate heavier traffic, and that would be it, was good until we undertook the RFP, did our due diligence with the geotechnical and the underwater investigations. The gates I'll go with the granite. The granite, I've never seen granite that is decayed either. But the cores that they provided, it looks like it's fractured. Never seen anything like that before. Typically, granite is one of those things that you dread when you get onto a construction project because you cannot break it. But they do have concerns with the material that we're up against. I'm not sure if it was overshadowed when they put the existing wharf in there or what happened. The gates, we've had a challenge, obviously, with uncontrolled access to the wharf itself, resulting in the deck in the condition that it's in right now. So our intent is to put, we've also had transient boaters that just show up and don't leave, American boaters, and they're not to pick on Americans, they're from all over the place. But our bylaw has been trying to chase these people all over the place, and we have no way of keeping them off. One way of keeping them off is not giving them access to the mainland. So if they pull up on their boat and we have a gate system there, they need to gain access to the mainland or to the dock itself through a controlled access point that we provide. We can give them a fob and they can sign in and out. And then when they're done their time there, we can remove the fob. We have the similar situation with the contractor dock with the uncontrolled access to and from, resulting in the damage of the deck itself. By putting some sort of security means in there with a similar feature, we're able to control the amount of access that goes into, for contractors in and out. We can set up programs where they have to sign an agreement with us. They're covered under, or we're covered under their insurance, so on and so forth. That's the ultimate goal of the security down at the wharf. In terms of installing piles instead of wood, just from the estimates, you're looking at somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 above the estimate that I provided of $2.7 million. So you'd be looking somewhere in the 3.5 million range to complete that same project. Anticipated life expectancy of the wharf on top of steel is 75 years, because regardless of what we put underneath, we are still going to have the concrete deck on top. Now, yes, the steel piles may last longer, that we wouldn't have to worry about that, and it would be a cost savings, over 2 or 3 life cycles. In terms of the boat launch, with the way that it goes, the reconfiguration, I think, would lead itself to that boat launch being open longer in the season. I don't want to say that it will always be open because I don't have that authority, but I think that it would remain open much longer with the amount of current that flows through there. I think that I've answered all of your questions, I hope. If I missed anything, let me know.
Follow-up, Counselor Maybe?
Yeah, no, I think you got the gist of it. With the wood material, what I was suggesting that even though it's a piles driven into the rock and then a retaining wall of metal, it's all infilled, not just a concrete deck, which one of the suggestions of the report actually stated. So it would actually be an infilled deck, with proper compaction so that you can take the heavy stuff on there and really have something that is sustainable for a long period of time, in my mind, with it infilled. A hollow deck will not last as long as an infilled deck. I can show you one that's 150 years old and it's still suitable for heavy equipment. So from that point of view, I do think an infilled deck is the only way to go. Yeah, that's going to last a long time. One other follow-up on the E design. Did they have a floating dock on the west side of the rampway for access for the boaters to access their boat after they've launched it? I know that they have the dock on one side, but a floating dock would then rise and fall as the water does to make it a little easier for them to get in and out of their craft. And I don't know whether I've seen that on that design. There's something else I wanted to mention too, but yes, interesting point about electric vehicles and potentially electric boats coming down the road, and I see it as puddle jumpers, like let's say a little Sea-Doo is electric and they plug it in, let alone cars that might be frequenting the area. Is there charging stations potential or any talk of thereof? I know that we're talking about new power to the dock for lighting and such. Just wondering if there's any consideration for future charging stations.
Thank you, through your worship. For the infilling, we would be looking at increasing our overall footprint within the water. That will pose some issues environmentally. And anytime you increase the surface area, you risk the fact that we're taking away from fish. We have to provide compensation for any environmental displacement that we might undertake. So that there's that factor. The floating dock on the west side, there are some challenges there because there was a private residence directly adjacent to the ramp. I don't know that we have the footprint required in order to fit one there. But there might be an option where we can do something on the face to get people to and off and on the wharf itself. It could be a ladder, it could be a number of things that we can get them up there. And then power to the dock. Yes, that was a conversation that we've had internally about, what would be required to get power to all of the slips if required. So yeah, I think it's something that even if we put the infrastructure on the wharf, the concrete part of the wharf itself, that we could extend electrical service out to the different slips as required in future.
Just to follow up on that one question, the first one, the footprint of the actual dock is numbered or design E in my mind. So that is the existing footprint with the boat ramp moved, right?
It's actually a smaller footprint.
Yes.
Option E is a smaller footprint than what we currently have in the field. But not all of the structure itself is in the water. So if we were to do a complete infill, then that would be, the entire structure would be considered in the water.
Sorry, I did have one more, but the dock presently is all infilled.
No, we have floating docks to the west of it as well.
Oh, the concrete deck dock, it's all infilled now.
But there is some of it is wood right now and not infilled.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comment or question in regards to that? Go ahead, Councillor Gorell.
In all honesty, I read that report and I'm left rather confused. Many of the points that Councillor Maybe has brought up, this is technical stuff done by an engineering firm. I am not confident in the least of voting. I'm not ready to vote on this, and I'd be astounded if the rest of us are. There are so many unanswered questions. And one that struck me is with the cost that is a bit high, or pardon me, a bit of a shock to me. It brings into question what we are actually trying to accomplish. We've approached this from the point of view of we want to reconstruct or whatever what is there, but perhaps what is there is not exactly necessary. As an example, in 2017 and 19, that entire dock was flooded. So I don't see anywhere in this report that talks about that in any way, shape, or form. Maybe we need to be talking floaters, massive floaters. I don't know. Maybe we restructure our entire thinking here. The river is a mighty beast, but we may not need all of this structure. We're not putting ships on this thing, and the ramp may be the important part. I'm just not sure where to go, but I'm not comfortable with any of this. And the emphasis on this idea that we have a couple of more slips is a bit of a red herring, because this township has shown no willingness to charge a real amount for those slips in terms of revenue. I know what I pay for a slip, and I know what some of the marinas are charging. And we'd have to bump that number up to approximately $2,500, $3,000 a slip to be meaningful and to be part of the river community, so to speak. And that, I don't know, that would be normal down there. So, and what's that provide you? Is that what, maybe $12,000 or $15,000 a year? It's a red herring as far as I'm concerned. So I don't know how to approach this. I'm not happy with, it just seems we're rebuilding something that might not be necessary. And we might approach this wholly outside the box with really a reduced footprint, with a ramp, with some floating equipment in there. But that's a whole nother, that's not addressed, and at least I understand why. So thank you.
So I guess I'll make some comments unless you wanted to, and there wasn't really a question in there, I don't think directly. Okay.
Well, the question would be, if we aren't going to approve this evening, what steps do we take moving forward? I mean, we could ask the engineering firm, are they from Thunder Bay, to come down here and start explaining this stuff? Because I really don't understand fully all this stuff about cribs and everything. And I'm not dumb about what goes on in the river, but I've seen other things in the river. And my last comment, I guess, would be, I saw some estimates from the federal government, you know, these ballpark estimates of what it was going to take to do the Rockport Customs Park. A local engineer came in and cut that in less than half. So I take these engineering studies with a bit of a grain of salt. I do appreciate it's supposed to be a top shelf asset of the community, but what is our goal? We're not tying, we don't have to tie tugboats up to this thing. It is to supplement the light boating traffic, or lighter boating traffic on the river. So I'm not sure our vision is in keeping here. We're just, we're rebuilding something that was built in 1966. Maybe we need to rethink it. How would we go about that? There's my question. Could we go about having I don't know, do you get a steering committee? I don't know how to handle this. I truly don't. But right now we're looking at, I'll bet you that's going to turn into, if we include the parking lot, which we purchased, which I think should be separated out from this, by the way. I don't think it should be included in the numbers. It artificially skews the numbers. We would have bought that. It should have bought that anyway. So, but anyway, we're going to be approaching at the end of the day, $3 million. So we have debt coming up. We have this debt coming up. We have a fire hall debt coming up. We have $800,000 worth of fire truck debt coming up. We have to be mindful here. There's, so how can we move forward being a little more comfortable about the debt? Or do we just say that's no problem? Thank you. I'm done.
Go ahead, Director.
Thank you. So I did ask the question of the design engineers about the wharf itself and the widths. I thought we could have narrowed up the wharf to actually fit more slips with the displacement of slips at the local marina. And what they've told me is that in order to accommodate the flows that we have in the ice shifting, that they have minimum widths that they have to adhere to, which is what the wharf design is built to. In terms of floating docks, I think that we'd have some serious problems out there trying to keep them in place. There is a pile of flow that runs through that area. There's a reason that our local contractor parks his boats there in the wintertime because it never closes. There's that much flow that runs through there, as everybody here knows. So I would have concerns myself with being able to retain floating docks at that location. As a municipal dock, a private dock, yes, but I don't know about a municipal dock if we'd want to go down that road. My understanding was that we have a lot of island residents, and we're not really providing any infrastructure for them. And this was our way of providing some infrastructure for them. Yes, we're not providing all of the slips that have been displaced, but at least we're showing an effort towards it. And that was, maybe I'm mistaken. That's what I thought our goal was to try to offset as much of that as possible. So if I was mistaken in that, then I apologize. I hope I've answered all of your questions.
Before you go any further and before follow up, Councillor Gorell, as far as the pricing of the slips, I don't think that I'm trying to remember the report and it's a blur right at the moment. I don't think we had identified the pricing on the slips at this point. We would be going to market value, and it would not be at necessarily a reduced rate, but rather to provide additional slips that have disappeared in recent changes to structures in current marinas that used to be operating. So just to identify and be very clear that we wouldn't be looking to rent the slips, unlike the St. Lawrence Parks Commission, who rents their slips or leases out their dock space at a reduced amount. We would be looking to recover and be in the same ballpark as the regular marine facilities within our own township. We're not looking to undercut them by any stretch of the imagination, I wouldn't think.
We didn't show any propensity to do that in the Rideau Canal situation. We had a modest increase, and people should be happy up there. So I don't know, we'd be, okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
If you wish to put a motion to defer on the table, Councillor Gorell, so you can speak to the director at length and maybe a bit more in depth to understand the drawings and the needs for the concrete top. You had mentioned something about not having a tugboat docked there, but that's actually a lot of the contractors who do have tugs. That's where they load. So it would actually be a place where they would potentially tie up to actually be loading material to take it out to the islands to serve the island residents. So as far as the cement versus the floater top, that would be one of the items for argument there. So if there is a motion to defer, I can put that on the table for the director to take further questions and have further investigation before a decision is made. I just need that motion to defer if that is what you wish. Councillor Maybe?
Yes, I would like to defer it to get some more information and maybe some further investigation into it. Yes.
Okay, so motion to defer is by Councillor Maybe, and defer to the April Committee of the Whole. Would that be sufficient?
Yes.
To defer. Okay, seconder on the deferral, Councillor Gorell. Okay, so the motion is that this motion be deferred until the April 2022 Committee of the Whole. I'll have a vote on the motion to defer. Please, all in favor? All opposed? And the deferral is carried. So that will come back to the April. I would strongly encourage all of the councillors to please take a moment to book a time with the director so that he can go over things in depth. It is a highly technical project, and I fully appreciate why people want to be comfortable with it. But the director is here for that information at any given time. Please give him a call. Okay, next on the motion, or sorry, next on the agenda is unfinished business. So is there any unfinished business? Okay, next is other business, and under other business, there's a letter from the Friends of Springfield House Complex revitalization. Revitalization of Springfield House Complex. So I'll ask the CAO to speak first in regards to this, and then we'll have further discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Counselor Maybe.
Counselor Maybe, this is,
Just
go
before,
ahead.
I thought Councillor Olkey said he wanted to step out of this one possibly.
I don't, to be honest, we've all made a donation to the,
Yes.
I don't think it's a conflict. Please go ahead.
I've collected my thoughts somewhat since the start of the meeting about this, and I have received some challenges about it, some concerns about why it actually turned up. I suggested it for discussion here because one of the things we've been accused of unfairly is lack of transparency. There's people here who are very concerned with this structure. There are people here who, although being very concerned with this structure, are seeking some kind of guidance and some kind of way ahead to deal with it at the same time as they're proposing things. So already there's some obfuscation about it. There's some confusion about it out there. And whatever order we can put on that thought, I think would be a good idea here, and to make clear what our position is about it now and what relationship should go ahead from now. And that's why I put the letter forward through staff for people to consider. So it's not in the background, it's not in the wings, and there's not a bunch of rumors about it. It is what it is, and I think we should give it consideration and look at it and come up with some kind of response to these good people. And yes, we've all contributed something to it. It is a bit of a gem of a building, but it will need a lot of work. I will just revise and remind that a previous council in 2017 or 2016 had it on their books to sell for $400,000. And they didn't do that. It's still a building we own. And many citizens have an interest in heritage buildings, including myself, and want to see something done with it. Therefore, you know, I received this, they reached out to me, but I'm putting it in public so everyone knows who's saying what to whom.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's no motion that's on the floor that's coming forward with this. There was just information. So I'll have the CAO speak to it and then answer any questions that the public may have. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the committee. Just before I get into the email from Mr. Birch on behalf of the Friends, I just want to provide the committee an update on where things stand with the Springfield House. If you all recall, in December 2021, Council authorized that repairs and necessary studies be undertaken to remediate the complex. This week, a contractor will be attending the site to complete a designated substance survey. This will confirm whether there's any dangerous substances on the premises or in the buildings, such as asbestos and whatnot. Obviously, this work needs to be done before any other work can go, so that we know that what we're dealing with inside the structures, and so that the workers that are in there are kept safe. Once the survey is completed, Tacoma Engineering will begin an invasive structural load assessment of the buildings. So this will entail them examining floor and roof joints, as well as opening up walls and examining the actual structural framing. They will also be doing some test holes outside by the foundation, so that they'll be able to get a good look and make a clear assessment of the condition of the foundations. This work will be is expected to start later in March and will be completed in April. Coming from this will be a detailed scope of work and associated construction costs and approximate timelines to complete the necessary work. In addition to that, staff's been working with the firm who did the building condition assessment last year on all the township facilities, but also on Springfield and Escott, to prepare grant applications for us to help get public funding to offset the cost of construction. I think we're chasing approximately $500,000 on this. The other thing that staff has been doing is been exploring options of where to temporarily house the archives and get them back working. we determined that a placement of a construction site type of trailer, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Atco brand of trailers, those type of things. They're construction site offices, most often how you see them. We were proposing that one of those types of trailers be placed on the property at Springfield Escott, and also that we would have the contents of the archives moved into the Public Works garage on site, which is climate controlled and access controlled. And then the archives people would have unlimited or free reign to go in and work on what they need through the materials in the garage and the trailer. Subject to input from archives, we're thinking that the timing for all this would be in later spring, once the weather is warm, and so you're not taking delicate archive materials out into the cold and then putting them into another building. We're also working right now actively to source a trailer. That would be something we would rent rather than buy. So this solution was presented during a video call held on March 4th, last Friday, with Pierre Mercier from the archives, Dana DeBenedette from the library, Kim Goodman, and myself. Mr. Mercier agreed to kindly listen to our proposal, asked a bunch of questions, and he was going back to his stakeholders to talk about it. And I made it clear that should anyone have any kind of questions about this, I'm certainly available to talk further on this. Before I proceed on to the email from Mr. Birch, are there any questions at this point?
I don't believe we have any hands up.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I also want to thank Mr. Birch and all the folks that comprise the Friends of Springfield House for their interest and commitment to helping preserve the complex and seeing that it remains a center for our culture and heritage within the township. In his email, Mr. Birch mentions some sort of agreement that's required to help with the township to help the Friends advance their application for charitable status under the Income Tax Act. I've asked Kim Goodman to work with Mr. Birch on this and get an idea of what they're looking for or what the Canada Revenue Agency is seeking. And we're happy to provide assistance on that front. One of the other things that Mr. Birch points out is there hasn't been very much communication on the status of the restoration project. And the simple reason being is there hasn't been an awful lot to report. We've been kind of working behind the scenes, getting our ducks in a row. When council gave us the go-ahead in December, Director Holliday's been busy doing his procurements to retain the firms to do the studies that we need to advance this project. Once things get really rolling, of course, anything big that comes up that requires a decision at the council level will first go to council, and before we can start talking about it with the various stakeholders. But I foresee as we get going a little farther down the road and things are hopping with the project, there will be an opportunity to have regular touch bases with the various stakeholders to bring them up to speed with what's happening, this month and coming up in the next month type of thing. And we certainly can do touch bases with council as well and keep them apprised of where things are, as in addition to coming back to council for any major decisions that we need. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Okay. I believe that was fairly clear that the money that we allocated in the budgeting process is being utilized or allocated in accordance to the steps needed to be taken, and that any further work to be done will be brought forward to council. But right now it sounds like we're well on our way to going forward. Oh, I see you, Councillor Jameson. And that we're moving forward in shoring up the building, which needs to be done before we do anything more. Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, I think, I hate to say it, but it goes back to some of the challenge here is who's on first. And I appreciate Your Worship, what the CAO has said very much, because there's clarity to that. But the piece that's still missing for me, that has been missing since the spring of 2019, is dealing with this MOU. We have a memorandum of understanding with respect to the archives. The archives is a responsibility falling within the library board, and none of this is being discussed in a formal basis at the library board. So we've got to separate the buildings from the archives. Unless I've completely misinterpreted for the last 3.5 years, the MOU, we've got to separate that discussion. The archives people clearly would like to get at it, and I think having walked through it with a couple of them over the weekend, the concept of the ACO trailer and the garage being secure enough to handle the materials is a good solution to allow us to have active archives. But none of this, and this is part of our problem, is going through the library board. So it's sort of beyond irritating for me that we continue to have everybody all over the shop. The buildings belong to the township, and in the course of the time between the approval of the budget and the money in the budget to proceed with the work the planning director has to do is actually not very long. So the budget approval, you go through December, you get into January. Here we are in March, and people are coming on site to do the work that will allow us to find out if we can even address what to do with the buildings, because these are serious studies with respect to the environment and the general condition of the building. So what have we not done well? I agree. We perhaps have not been as good as communicating as we should have, but the fact is the township owns the building, and as a result, the township is responsible for the safety and security and all the environmental aspects, which have to be reviewed before we can allow anybody to start doing anything. And two, the whole business with the archives needs to be completely separated from the discussion of these buildings so that the library takes charge of this thing and we can move it down the road. I'm sorry if I'm sounding irritated, but this has been going on since I walked through the door and before that. And I would like to see us get that governance thing sorted out. And then we can clearly tell friends what might be possible for them to do. But not until then. Thank you.
Any further comment or question in regards to this letter from the Friends of Springfield House Complex? I don't see any. So trusting that information is sufficient to satisfy the questions that were asked, and that we will continue to move forward. I see that there's a hand up, Mr. Sly, I believe. Keith, is that you? Just a second, we'll click on you to see where allowed to talk. There we go. So go ahead, Keith, you can unmute yourself.
Right. Just a question regarding the materials in the archive holdings for Tacoma to do their work investigating the structural integrity of the buildings. Would it be necessary for all the archive material to be moved out of the buildings before that work commences? Do we know that yet?
Director Holliday, do you know if the archive material needs to be moved out of the building in order for any of these studies to be done?
Through your worship, the initial study, it's going to be just small. They're saying 4x4 sections of wall in certain areas that are open right now. One's by the chimney at the back of the building, one's at the chimney at the front of the building, and then some test holes around the foundation outside. So I do not foresee any need to move any of the archival material, but if we do, we will certainly be engaging the group to make sure that we've considered that.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll move forward with 7.2, which is an open letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau testing at the land border. Open letter to Prime Minister Trudeau. And this was a letter that was received by the township seeking our endorsement, but needed to come to council for discussion prior to moving forward with that. So comments or questions in regards to the letter that was supplied? Go ahead, Councillor Wilkie.
May we know who originated the letter?
I believe it was the Association for the Border Duty-Free businesses that operate at the borders, and we have one here in our municipality at the Thousand Islands Crossing. So we received it from a business owner here in the township asking for our support. The letter was received in its entirety, and we obviously had no input into the writing of the letter, but were asked to endorse it. So it was put on the agenda to identify that it was received. Unless I receive a motion direct from council asking us to endorse that and call a vote on it, then we will take it as information items received and then go forward. Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Only, I guess the confusion for me and all the concern I had about the letter is that it's under other business. And I, as an information item, we would say what we want, whether it was Springfield House or this letter. But to the point of the letter, it's not so much making a motion to endorse it or not endorse it. It's a question of I would not be comfortable with this particular wording of this particular letter coming from our government, to the extent that I think there is a point there that we might want to discuss down the road if things don't change. But I do believe the letter itself needs a lot of work to be a government-to-government letter. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO Donachie.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Jameson regarding the tone of the letter. I think the sentiment that the COVID restrictions have been hard on local economies that rely on cross-border traffic is valid, but also valid is lifting restrictions when it's safe to do so. I feel like council will always do whatever it can to support the local businesses while acting in a manner that protects public health and safety. This letter, the veracity of some of the statements in the letter and its overall tone concerns me. I believe that communications between levels of government should be accurate and courteous and respectful, and regardless of what the message is. And there are certainly ways to convey your concerns about something in a tone that hits all those points. You know, from just my perspective, I agree with Councillor Jameson's comments. I think there is a way, if council wishes, that we can express our concerns to the Prime Minister about the economic impact that our local economies are feeling, and that you know, we support public health and safety, and that restrictions that no longer required should be lifted when appropriate.
So based on the fact that, just an addendum, I believe that this letter has already been submitted to the federal government. At the time that we received it, they were looking for a quick signature from myself on behalf of the township, where I indicated that this would need to come before council. So it's kind of a moot point, but it did need to come to council because it was correspondence that was requested to be supported one way or the other. Just to clarify the position that I have here, when it comes to these sorts of requests, this is not my decision as head of council. When you're talking about some of the pieces that they're identifying in that particular letter. So that's why it came forward. So it is a moot point at this point, because I believe it's already gone forward, but it still was required to come forward as correspondence. So it's noted, Councillor Jameson, that maybe next time when we're doing our agenda up, that it should be coming forward as an information item at that point in time. Any other comments or questions in regards to this letter? Seeing none, go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. So, Province of Ontario said that we don't have to have proof of vaccination anymore. How does that play into this type of letter? And, you know, going forward, I think we're going to see that relax even a bit more. The other point that I had was children that aren't vaccinated, but the parents are. Does that change how this reflects to those children? Kind of a personal note for me for July. So I'm kind of curious on how it's all going to work out. This letter doesn't pertain maybe to that, but it does have some reflection. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay. I'm going to go forward with the next item on the agenda, which is notice of motion. Are there any notices of motion? Call for notice of motion. Go ahead, Councillor Olkey.
Yes, please, Your Worship. I have a proposal for a declaration. Is that the right word? A resolution. Yes, I think it can be shared.
Okay, so the
world is facing right now a crisis of huge humanitarian proportions. And I'm being contacted by a number of people about it for various reasons. And really, I think I would like to endorse what the federal government is trying to do in terms of what it is able to do. We are in a defensive alliance in NATO, and that implies certain things, and there are diplomatic things that have to go ahead in certain ways. And as citizens, as representatives of citizens at the grassroots level, perhaps it's appropriate to make a motion of support of the government and to encourage them in the path that they're going. This morning, I couldn't share it. This morning, I saw a photograph about 6 railroad coaches in the Kiev station, and there were 10,000 people trying to get on that train. The only hope really is that the Ukrainians can hold out long enough that either someone will toss Putin out or they will actually come realistically to the table. There's no other way really to intervene other than providing support that we and NATO are providing. Speaking personally, and probably somewhat emotionally, there is no other way at this time that we can legally or practically intervene otherwise in that conflict. But anyways, the wording is up there if people wish to read it.
So the notice of motion coming forward from Councillor Olkey to support the Ukraine, whereas Council is mindful of the ongoing and desperate crisis facing the valiant nation of the Ukraine, and whereas we recognize diplomatic constraints and treaty obligations upon our own nation, and therefore be it resolved that we most strongly encourage the Government of Canada to continue providing all possible moral and material support to the Ukraine in their time of extreme peril. So that motion will come forward to Council for ratification, should wish.
I would ask, it's a fairly simple motion. Could it be done this evening, or is that against all rules?
I believe that if it's, although it wasn't on the agenda, it wasn't published. It was not published in advance, so we will have to wait till next week, unfortunately.
Right.
So I understand the urgency. Hopefully we can, I'm not sure who, Councillor Jameson, go ahead.
Just to be sure, is this within our, I was going to say Ken, that's not the right word, within our purview? I mean, I guess it's in its own way, it's not a lot different than sending a letter about border restrictions,
Yeah.
obviously on a different level. But I just want to be sure that, it's not a question of not agreeing. I would certainly absolutely share this feeling. But I just want to be sure that it's within our purview.
I think basically the letter would be sent on to our MP at the federal level and also the Prime Minister's office, just showing our commitment and to solidarity with the Ukraine. And as clearly stated in the motion or the resolution, that we would provide all moral and material support possible when appropriate to help them survive this catastrophic event. So I think it's a matter of any of the other letters that we receive on a regular basis that we're asked to endorse be the same thing, that we're just pressuring our federal member and our Prime Minister to support those in need during this conflict. So I think it is within our purview. Go ahead, Councillor Grubb.
Just in addition to Councillor Olkey's motion, tomorrow, I believe, is county.
Joint services is tomorrow, not county.
Oh, it's not county tomorrow?
It's
Okay, 'cause I was just
committee of the
gonna
whole is Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay. So it's between now and next week. I just wondered if it would be possible to bring up this motion for consideration by county as well. Thank you.
I can definitely forward it on after council to the council meeting at county, which would be the third week of the month. So thank you for that suggestion. Okay. Okay, so that will come back at next week's meeting. Next is the mayor's update. It will be brief this afternoon. I just wanted to say a tremendous thanks to our operations team. The last few weeks have been extremely difficult when it came to weather events and road conditions and challenges with ice and snow. I think part of our job here at the municipality, I've had a conversation with the director of operations, is about really educating people as to why we might do certain things. And there was one of our operators who made a post on a Facebook message after having quite a tumultuous ride home from Kingston with his wife. He actually described why in some cases we would not plow or we would leave snow on the road on top of ice. And he was very descriptive and very matter of fact. And it was very informative because not everybody really understands. Everybody wants to drive on bare roads and that's what they think the ideal is. But depending on what's coming, sometimes leaving the snow on the roads might be better in the long run from a traction point of view. Not to mention our township employees who work in operations often will work overtime and long hours, and there is restrictions by the ministry in regards to those hours, and we have to adhere to that. And obviously for the safety of our plow truck drivers. Not to mention the fact that during some of these weather events, we had our own plows go off the road, not because of poor handling and control, but just because of road conditions. So when road conditions are extreme, and we ask people to only travel only when necessary and give themselves lots of time, that's what we mean. And so I just want to say thank you to all of our operations department who work very diligently, take great pride in the job that they do. And we'll be communicating a little bit further in the future about why we do what we do and how we do it at the different times and the different weather events. I'd also like to recognize that the township, you would have seen that there's a number of positions that are changing, and we have some retirements coming up. So we have some new people joining our organization. And just to say thank you to our new clerk here this evening. This is her first committee of the whole. We had a few technical glitches at the beginning, but we got them sorted out, and here we are. We thank everybody for your patience. So other than that, I guess I will conclude my mayor's update as the director, as Councillor Jamieson had indicated. I have joint services tomorrow, committee of the whole on Wednesday, and also I'm a member of Mapleview Lodge on Thursday. So I will try to report back on any items that might pertain to our municipality at that time. So with that, go ahead, Councillor Groh.
Thank you, Your Worship. And on a happy note, I would just like to recognize one of our citizens in Rockport, Ontario, Mr. Hunter Grant was given the Lifetime Business Achievement Award by the Brockville Community Chamber of Commerce, and also his very fine friend for another year, Mr. Paul Fournier. Fournier's deceased, and he's not. He's a resident of our neighboring township, Front of Young, and both of these gentlemen contributed mightily toward business adventures and fundraising in Brockville. And Mr. Grant has been significant in fundraising in our township. And I just want to give them due recognition from this council. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor, maybe you had your hand up?
Yeah, just to give a reminder that since we've been in here, it has snowed, so there's ice underneath all that. So everybody be careful. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands up for announcements, I will ask for a motion to adjourn, that the meeting adjourn until the call of the chair. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Maybe. And seconder for the motion, Councillor Jameson. Non-debatable motion. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, and we're carried. Thank you.